Previously, we had looked at SubProcedure as a way to reduce some code in our programs. If we had events that were going to be repeated in various areas of the program, we could call a subprocedure and have it perform some tasks for us. And we've got the little guessing game program up here. Again, it's just a little simple program where I'm trying to guess a number between 1 and 50, and it gives me feedback here on whether it's too low or too high of a guess. It's not a lot to see there that you need to worry about. But the basic idea here is that here again we have that too low or too high happening, but I've set up a subprocedure to do that called giveHint, and we're calling it here. Now what we're adding on to here, before we just called giveHint, it did its thing, put up something, and we didn't really pass any information to it. And now we're going to learn that we can pass information or data to a subprocedure. Okay, so in this instance, there are two pieces of information that we are sending to us, this subprocedure. We're sending it the secret number that we're trying to guess, right? And we're sending it the guess that the user made. So those two things can be compared, okay? Now, when I type these in up here, these are called they're called arguments. They are arguments that I am sending to the subprocedure. Now, down here in the subprocedure, in the parentheses here, I have to set variables to receive those arguments. Now down here in the subprocedure, they're called parameters of the subprocedure. This is just a vocabulary thing. We call them arguments when we're sending them. When they're getting received, we call them parameters. So down here, it's just it's like setting up a variable inside of this subprocedure that's just going to exist in this subprocedure. So, but instead of using the keyword dim or anything like that or static, we say by val. Or another thing we can say is by ref, and we'll get to that in another video. But right here we have by val, which all by val means is a value is getting sent here into this parameter, and the subprocedure cannot change that value. That value is set, and it's just going to use it to figure out something. Okay, so notice down here, first num is, these are just kind of generic names, first num, second num. Okay, that's how your subprocedures should kind of be written, with kind of generic types of names, because the idea behind these is that you would utilize them in numerous programs. Okay, so if I have these generic names, that helps me do that. That's where you need to put pre and post comments on your subprocedures also, because if you're going to reuse some subprocedure, you can look here to see what it does. So the pre here is two numbers sent to procedure to compare, and the post is the procedure says whether the guess was higher or lower than some hidden number. Actually, that could be written a little more generically than that. It'll just say whether the first num is higher or lower than the second number, or whatever like that. So anyway, we've got these two. Now it's important to understand a couple of things. When I call this subprocedure, I have to send it the same number of arguments as there are parameters. If I go up here and try to send it some third thing, and while int low is a variable that's been set up here, if I try to send it a third thing, it's going to say here that too many arguments, right? So it's saying you can't send giveHint 3 things to look at because it only accepts 2. Same thing if I went and put a third thing down here and I was only sending 2, it would say there was too few arguments, right? So the number of arguments must match the number of parameters, number one. And secondly, the order has to be correct. So I'm setting it the secret number and int guess down here, right? If I flip these around by accident, here's where I'm going to get a logic error and not a error that's a syntax error or anything like that. It's not going to show up as a wavy line or anything. It would just work the opposite of what I want it to. Okay, so you do have to make sure secret number is going to end up being the first number down here, and int guess is going to end up being the second number down here. Okay, so But once you do that, this data is getting passed down to this sub-procedure. It uses it to figure out whether that message box should show up or not. And I kind of already showed you that that was working. So that's kind of the main thing to know about these. So we can create sub-procedures with parameters and utilize those in our programs. Now there's a couple of benefits of this. And here again, the first one, in this little guessing game program, it isn't the greatest example of showing this, but if this were a bit of code that needed to happen a bunch of different places in a program, I could just keep calling give hint and send it the arguments it needed, and it would do its thing for me. We'll be doing some assignments where you'll see the benefits of creating this stuff. The second thing is, you'll notice I got secret number and I got int guess up here that I'm using, and they're local variables, right? Down here, I'm using the data that's in those variables because it gets sent to these variables. So it's a way that I can pass data from one procedure to another and not have to make my variables global. And that's a better use of memory, and it makes your data more secure inside the program. So that's another reason we want to do that. Another thing I'd like to show you is, so let's say I make this generic little sub procedure also. If I copy this code, and we'll just go over here to a folder somewhere, and we'll say new text document. So this is just going to be a notepad document, and I can say hint sub procedure, and I'm just going to open that up, and we'll paste the code inside of there, right? And save it, close it. And so now, the nice thing about this too is, notice if I have my window set for a preview of this code, right? If I had and I do on my other computer, a folder with a bunch of sub-procedures and even functions, which we'll talk about in a little bit here, that were reusable for programs, I basically can see these tech documents. Oh, here's a give hint one that maybe I want to use in another program, right? And the really nice thing of setting it up this way, in this preview part here of the window, I don't even have to open this document to select this text and copy and paste it. I can just select it, copy and paste it out of the preview in Windows 7 here, and put it into my program if I wanted to. So that makes it really nice. It's a time saver. If you learn how to write these kind of generically for certain things that you think might be reusable in other programs, it can save you a lot of time. So that's just a little bit about using sub-procedures that have parameters built into them.